Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. We're looking today at Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 4, which in your English Bible would be verse 5. And we've been seeing what happens to God's people when they refuse to acknowledge God. Their relationship with God breaks down, but so do the social relationships with each other. And verse 3 gave us a very tragic description of conflict between brothers in the faith there. And verse 4 here is going to continue the same tragic description of what happens among the people. Let's go ahead and read the text in Hebrew as we get started. Ve'ish ברעהו יחתלו ואמת לא ידברו לימדו לשונם דבר שקר העבה נילאו. So we start with this vav, and a man. So this is sort of the idea of each one again. We saw that in the previous verse. Against his neighbor. We saw basically the same structure again in the previous verse as well. So this is a suffix. This is a 3ms suffix here. And this is our noun friend or companion. Re'ach with a furtive patak, usually written like that, like a little bit off to the side, because it's pronounced before the final ayin, like that. Re'ach. So a man against his neighbor. Now what is this word? Well, you see a yod at the beginning and u at the end, you're going to be thinking it's an imperfect, and you're correct. You're going to be thinking it's a third masculine plural. You're correct. You look at the yod with a schwa underneath it, you might be thinking, is that a pl? But it looks a little bit funny. Well, no, it's actually not. This is going to be a hifiel, but it's a little bit unusual. And it's not from the verb hatal, it's from the verb tal, lal. You can see the dagesh right there in the lamed, so we actually have two lamed, so it's talal. And the hay that you have here is actually the hay of the hifiel. Now, in almost all of our forms, we're used to seeing the hay of the hifiel in the imperfect is elided right into the rest of the word, and it usually just disappears and leaves a patak vowel, something like that. And we're used to seeing that, but there are some cases where the hay of the hifiel shows up actually in the imperfect, and this is one of them with this verb. It does that. The hay of the hifiel will show up in the imperative and the infinitives as well, but here it's actually showing up in the imperfect. So it's a little bit unusual, but not totally anomalous. It does happen sometimes, and that's what you have here. So the hay there is the prefix of the hifiel. And talal is a verb which means to mock, to trifle with, to deceive. This is what Delilah threw back at Samson in Judges chapter 16 3 times. You're mocking me, you're trifling with me, you're deceiving me because you won't tell me the truth about the source of your strength. So it's that sort of an idea. So every man mocks his neighbor or against his neighbor. Now this verb usually takes its object with the bait. So we could translate it against or deceives against his neighbor, but you get the idea. He deceives his neighbor. This is sort of a direct object marker. And truth is our regular word for truth. We saw a previous word, amuna, which has to do with faithfulness, but this is truth, the more common word for truth. Truth is not spoken. They do not speak, actually. This is actually with the yod at the beginning and a u at the end. This is another imperfect third common plural, or third masculine plural, rather, and this is a pl because we're used to dealing with this verb always in the pl. So there's your schwa, but you have the other signs of a pl. So truth, they do not speak. So no one is speaking truth anymore. They have taught, limadu. Well, we just have, this is going to be a perfect with that u ending on it, so it's going to be a third common plural, and this is a pl from the verb lamad. Lamad in the cow means to learn, and in the pl means to cause to learn, or actually to teach or to train. A very common word for that. So they have taught. Now, they have not taught to something. That lamed is actually part of the word here, but we can forgive you if you thought that was teaching to somebody else. But the here is a suffix. This is a 3mp suffix, and we have the word lashon, usually with a final nun, and lashon, as we saw earlier, means tongue. So they have taught their tongue speaking. Now we could have expected a lamet here to speak. This is going to be an infinitive construct. This is the object, more or less. What have they taught their tongue? Speaking lies, speaking falsehood or lie. So again, we could have expected a lamed here. We don't have it. We don't always have to have it, and it's very clear in the context. This is what they've taught their tongue, speaking lies. And then last couple words are a little bit tricky. This word here, ha'ave, remember this vav here is actually a consonant because you have a vowel that goes underneath it. This is an infinitive absolute being used sort of as a substantive noun here, and it's a hiphil, and it's from the verb ava, which exists in the cow almost with the same meaning as the hiphil. It's not a very common verb, but it means to commit iniquity or to do wrong. So doing wrong, nil'u. Now what is this one here? This looks a little bit tricky. You get an u ending of it, so it looks like it's going to be a perfect, unless the nun is a prefix of or preformative, but it's not. This is actually a prefix of the nifal. So we're going to have a perfect, third common plural, and this is a nifal, and this is from the verb la'ah, like this. You may recognize the word Leah, the proper name, Leah. Typically we used to translate it as she had weak eyes. Well, this is to be weak. And in the nifal would have the sense to make oneself weary doing something. So they have made themselves weary in doing what? Iniquity. So they have taught their tongue to speak lies. Doing iniquity, they have made themselves weary. Now we're going to see what's the sense of this. There's a couple of different ways it might be translated, but it seems as though they've been wearing themselves out. Doing iniquity, they've come to the point now where they're all worn out because they've done so much evil. Not a very pretty picture at all. Well, let's go ahead and hide our work there and look at a couple translations and see what they've done with that. Let's take first of all the Christian Standard Bible. Each one betrays his friend, his companion. No one tells the truth. Truth they do not speak. Okay. They have taught their tongues to speak lies, speaking deception or lies, putting it in plural, even though it's singular here, but that fits very well. They wear themselves out doing wrong. They wear themselves out is this word over here. They weary themselves doing wrong as sort of the adverbial noun sense. They've worn themselves out with this idea. So this infinitive absolute idea is sort of a manner. This is how they've worn themselves out and what they've been doing. Another translation a little bit different. New Jerusalem Bible. Each one cheats his friend. You see how we're working with this word over here to deceive, to mock. Like Delilah betrayed Samson. She cheated him in a different sense. Yeah, okay. I think that's a little bit weaker than betray. Each one cheats his friend, never telling the truth. They have trained instead of just simply taught. I actually like that word in this context. It fits very well. They have trained their tongues to lie and devote all their energies to doing wrong. Devote all their energies, wearied themselves out. Devoting all their energies to it, I think that's pretty good, but the verb here seems to almost push the idea that they've committed all their energies until they don't have any energy left, as they've given themselves so much to doing wrong. And then there's one more that does it in a slightly different way, is the old RSV. Everyone deceives, betrays, cheats, deceives his neighbor, and no one speaks the truth. They have taught their tongue to speak lies. They commit iniquity and are too weary to repent. Now that one surprised me, because they commit iniquity and are too weary. They've wearied themselves out in their committing of iniquity. But this to repent idea, I just don't see that in the text directly. It seems as though, like, if they had more energy, they would probably come back and repent. No, I don't think so. Their hearts are so set on doing evil. They've just totally worn themselves out, but I'm not sure I see any indication that they're ready to repent. So that one just surprised me, and maybe RSV isn't trying to push that too strong. In any case, the people are persistent in their doing of evil, and it's broken down their own relationships with each other. Unfortunately, this is the kind of thing we can see in our current day society, in our country, other countries around the world, when people turn away from the Lord and don't acknowledge Him and refuse to acknowledge others as made in God's image and follow God's ways. These are the inevitable results of that kind of decision. Well, it's not a pretty text, but it's a very important text to understand for all of us. So check back with us soon as we continue working through Jeremiah 9 in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.